Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a book review for The Rose Bargain by Sasha Peyton Smith. The Rose Bargain is a new YA fairy fantasy and it was released on February 4th. It's been compared as The Selection meets The Cruel Prince, and while I have not read the Selection series, I have read the Folk of the Air trilogy, and this does involve fairies and fairy magic. The way that I structure my book reviews is I discuss the plot, the things that I liked about the book, the things that I didn't like so much, and then I give the book an overall rating. I always put the timestamps to those particular sections down in the description box so you can skip around as you like. In The Rose Bargain, we are following an alternative London, and what happened during the War of the Roses is that this fairy queen entered from the fairy realm and ended up making a bargain with the king, and the bargain was so that she would become queen and rule forever because the fairy Queen Mor is immortal. There used to be a portal between the two different realms, but after Mor came over from the fairy realm, she sealed the portal. So she has been ruling London for a couple hundred years now, and she has closed off London to all of its neighbors, so they're basically like an isolated country. So this is definitely an alternative history retelling, as it does take place in London, England, but it has a magical element. We follow our main character, Ivy. She's 18 years old, and she comes from an aristocratic family. She is the daughter of a marquis, and her sister one night went missing for 2 weeks. There was all of these rumors about what she had done, and then one day she just showed up and couldn't remember where she was. But because of that scandal, Ivy's family's name has been tarnished, and they were looking to Lydia to kind of step out into society, find a good husband, get married, and kind of like solidify the family's position in high society. But because of what Lydia did and the fact that she was missing for 2 weeks, that's no longer going to happen. So Ivy kind of has to step up and mend their broken social status. And the way that she does this is the queen announces that her son Bram is going to be taking a wife. And Bram one day entered, about 4 years ago, entered from the fairy realm into the mortal realm. And everyone thought that the portal was closed, but he figured out a magical way to do this. And his excuse for coming over from the fairy realm was that his father, the king, began to be suspicious that he was going to usurp him, tried to have him killed, and Bram fled for his life. And then there is also another prince, and his name is Emmett. So we have Prince Bram, the fairy prince, Queen Mor's actual son, and then we have Emmett. And Emmett is an adopted prince. So Queen Mor did take a husband, a consort. His name is Prince Edgar, and this was his son from another previous marriage. So it's not Queen Mor's biological child. And one thing about Queen Mor is that she offers her subjects bargains because she has magical abilities. If they ask something of her, she will grant it to them, but they have to give up something in return. Sometimes these bargains are bloody. Sometimes you give up something that you really shouldn't have, and sometimes she warps the bargain so that it's very, very cruel. But everyone is expected to make a bargain. When Ivy turns 18, she is expected to step out into society, and on this day, it's basically like a cotillion. All the girls that are stepping out into society are expected to go to the queen and make a bargain. So we're following Ivy on this day, and she decides not to make a bargain. And then we find out that her son, Prince Bram, the fairy, is going to take a wife. And the queen is holding kind of like a competition to see who is going to be Bram's wife. So when I first read like that premise and it started getting into the plot of this marriage competition, I'm like, okay, this is like The Bachelorette, because all of these girls have to compete in these little competitions to see who would be Bram's best wife. And they involve like magical elements. They involve like a bit bloody and gruesome type things because Queen Mor is a fairy and she doesn't value human life, and she kind of sees humans as her playthings. So she puts all of these girls through these little tests and trials that are a bit bloody. Then we find out that Emmett is trying to gather together some people that might want to overthrow Queen Mor. She's an immortal queen. She's not human. And while she doesn't like severely oppress the people, they still have their freedoms. She doesn't value humans, like she doesn't see them as her equal. The bargains that she makes with them can be very cruel, and she likes to play tricks. So while she's not like going around murdering people all the time, she's not like a good noble queen. And Emmett decides to try and overthrow her, and he decides to enlist the help of Ivy because he thinks that she might be able to help them. So now we have a potential love triangle where we have Ivy, who is trying to marry Bram and going through this bachelorette type situation. And then we have her on the side working with Bram's brother Emmett as they are trying to see if they can overthrow Queen Mor, and feelings start to develop between Ivy and Emmett, as well as Ivy and Bram. So this is definitely a book that has been described as a romantasy, and it definitely has a heavy romantic plot in it. Going on into the things that I liked, if you are someone that enjoys a good fairy story, I feel like this would work for you. While the first book does take place in London and there are limited interactions with fairies, as the story progresses, we do see that the other world and the fairy realm and fairies are going to be a more prevalent part of the plot. This is the first book in a series. I thought Ivy was an okay protagonist. There were things that I liked about her and things that I didn't. So the things that I did like about her is Ivy was entering this competition for her family. Most of the acts that she did were pretty selfless. And if you think about it, like, her family was shunned because of what Lydia did. So Ivy decides to step up and she's like, I'm not going to be able to find a husband anyway. I'm an outcast from society. I might as well, like, what do I have to lose by entering this competition? So she is being selfless in a way, but at the same time, she's not. She's trying to save her family's reputation, but she's not like she's trying to save their life. They could have left high society, go live on a little rural farm somewhere and been perfectly happy, perfectly content, perfectly safe, all of that. So when I say Ivy was selfless, I feel like her motivations were a bit superficial. It was all about saving face and keeping them in high society. I feel like if it had been higher stakes with regards to what she was saving her family from, I probably would have had more respect for her. But Ivy also has a lot of love towards her sister, a lot of love and a lot of resentment, because she just has a really strong bond with Lydia, and she is very mad that Lydia left, can't remember where she went, won't tell her what happened, and she kind of feels like Lydia is the reason that she is in this position, having to compete for Bram's hand. So I liked how the author showed, you know, how you can love your siblings but also still harbor negative feelings towards them, and she really did, like, do a lot for Lydia in this book. You could really see the sisterly love. And then another thing I appreciated was there were other girls competing for Bram's hand, obviously. There were 6 girls total, I think, and I'm so glad that the author did not include, like, these girls being catty towards one another or trying to sabotage one another. At the beginning, there were moments where they didn't really like each other, but towards the end of the book, all of these girls were really good friends. They really cared about one another, and it was so wholesome and refreshing, instead of her going the other way where these girls were just hating on each other all the time. Going on into the romance, because the romance is a pretty big aspect of this book, I liked that it was a forbidden romance, because literally Ivy is in this competition to marry the fairy queen's son, who is a fae himself, and she is working in secret with the prince's brother in order to overthrow his mother, and there is definitely attraction between the two of them. They do have a physical relationship at times, and it is very forbidden, so the stakes are really high. There's a lot of angst. There's a lot of emotion between them because they know that they can never be together. And, you know, Ivy's doing this not only for her family, but also to help save London. So there is a ton that Ivy is responsible for, and she is putting that ahead of her feelings for Emmett. And then I will say there were a lot of good plot twists towards the end of the book that opened up for a good sequel. We have some actions from a character that kind of coasted through the whole book, seemed very benign, but based on who this character is, you know that they're not as benign as they seem. And there was like a huge just blow up at the end of this book where all of these reveals happened. We learn these characters that are betraying other characters. We learn what happened to Lydia and how she is involved in this plot. There was just a lot of twists at the end of this book, and the author did a good job with that. Going on to the things that I didn't like and kind of piggybacking off of what I just said about the ending, this book did feel a bit rushed at the end because all of those big reveals, Lydia's backstory, all of that takes place in about 30 pages. And the pacing, it just felt a little bit off to me. And then a couple of other things I didn't like. While I appreciate how Ivy was written as a character and her selflessness, I felt like she wasn't written to be believable in the time period in which she existed. So this is supposed to be 1840 something, and she was written like a girl plucked out of 2024 and dropped into a YA story that's supposed to take place in the 1800s. Also, this book was written from Ivy's point of view most of the time. So I was reading this book and I was a decent way through, and all of a sudden the author drops a point of view from one of the other 6 girls in the competition into the book. And I was like, whoa, why? Why is this important? And then she sporadically put little chapters from the other character's point of view, like interspersed in the book. And I just found it discombobulated. It added nothing to the story, nothing at all. I really wish she would have just kept with Ivy's point of view for the whole book, because these girls' stories were pretty much irrelevant. They just weren't important. And it could have just cut back on the page count. And then there was a backstory between Faith, one of the girls in the competition, and Emmett. And basically Emmett and Faith had dated, and the whole story behind their dating, how they met, why they decided to stop seeing each other, their current relationship as friends, I didn't like it at all. I don't think it needed to be in there. It didn't add anything except little bits of drama that we didn't need. And the whole reason I didn't like it was that, okay, so Emmett and Faith are like, yeah, we find each other attractive. Yeah, we like each other as people. We're friends, but we don't love each other. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, if you're looking for a potential mate that you want to be with for the rest of your life, you're going to want to be physically attracted to them. You're going to want to like them as a person. That's like the recipe for falling in love with someone, but they don't love each other. It didn't make any sense to me. And then comes Bram's characterization. So Bram is the fairy prince and all these girls are trying to marry him. And there were interactions between Bram and Ivy. I think probably they maybe spoke to each other. There were maybe like 20 lines of dialogue between the two of them, maybe a little bit more, but I'm exaggerating. But there wasn't a lot. Ivy and Bram did not have a lot of page time together. Ivy and Emmett had way more page time. And Bram was like telling Ivy, you're the one I want. I love you. And I'm like, you don't even know her. You have spent no time with her individually. And the one time you do, you kiss her. That's like kissing a stranger. You've hardly even spoken to her. And then there was this one scene that just gave me the ick. So like I said, Ivy and Emmett are having feelings for one another, and they do act on those feelings. And there was a scene where they are physically intimate, and then literally Ivy leaves Emmett's room, goes to Bram, and starts making out with Bram. And I was just like, oh God, that gave me the ick so much. It did. It didn't need to be written that way, and it was weird. But that's the way the story goes. This is a forbidden romance, love triangle type thing. But going on into Bram, at first I was like, he's boring, he needs to be better written, what is his role in all of this? But at the end of the book, when all of the reveals happen, we do see that Bram is going to play a much bigger role than the author initially let on. So I'm really glad to see that he is going to be more well developed. All in all, The Rose Bargain was a fun book. It was fairly easy to get through. It was very fast-paced. If you are someone who likes the romantic tropes of love triangles, a marriage of convenience, forbidden romances, if you like this selection, or if you enjoy fairies and fairy lore, then this book might be for you. For me personally, I just would have liked to see this book fleshed out a little bit more. It seemed incredibly surface level, and it's a YA book. It's suggested for ages 13 plus, and the characters are 18 and 19 years old in this book, so I guess it is written for the age group in which it's marketed towards, but I just wanted more from it. Something about it just left me just a little bit unsatisfied. Even though the story was complete, I think this is just a subjective thing. So in the end, I ended up giving The Rose Bargain 3 out of 5 stars. I'm glad I read it, and I may very well continue with the series because it was fun. If I do, I will be getting the book from my library. Unfortunately, I didn't like it enough to want to include it in my collection, but I do recommend it if you're someone that enjoys a good fairy book with lots of romance. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in another video soon. Bye!